The grand halls of the Sci-Fi Union Senate were silent as the final vote was cast. A holographic display flickered in the center of the room, showing the desperate faces of the auxiliary delegation. Their leader, Chirin Vel, stood tall despite the exhaustion in his golden eyes. "Please," he said, his voice echoing across the chamber. "Our people have always followed the laws of the Union. We have never started wars, never broken treaties. We only seek your protection." The response was swift. A Sci-Fi official, dressed in silver robes, leaned forward. "The Union does not waste resources on lost causes," he said coldly. "The Draken Dominion has already marked Velmera as their next conquest. If we intervene, war is inevitable." Chirin clenched his fists. "If you abandon us, millions will perish." The official's expression did not change. "That is unfortunate, but the Union has made its decision." The hologram flickered, and then the connection was cut. The Senate doors closed, leaving the auxiliary delegation standing alone. For the first time in thousands of years, the auxiliary were truly alone in the galaxy. A desperate plea. Back on their homeworld, Velmera, the skies were dark with approaching storm clouds. The auxiliary people knew what was coming, not just the storm, but the war. The Draken fleet had been spotted at the edge of the system. Their invasion was only days away. Chirin Vel returned to the auxiliary High Council, where the leaders of his people waited. Fear was in their eyes. "They refused," he said, his voice heavy. "The Union has turned its back on us." Gasps filled the chamber. One council member, Rhea Sol, whispered, "Then this is the end." "No," Chirin said. "There is still one more hope." Rhea frowned. "Who?" Chirin turned to the large galactic map hovering above the center of the room. His gaze fixed on a small, isolated sector, one that many species feared and others mocked. "The humans," he said. Silence followed. The auxiliary had heard the stories, just like every other race in the Union. Humans were reckless, unpredictable, stubborn. They did not obey the rules of diplomacy. But there was one thing about humans that no species could deny. They never abandoned their own. Rhea hesitated. "They are not part of the Union. If we ask for their help, we risk angering the Sci-Fi." Chirin's golden eyes hardened. "The Sci-Fi have already abandoned us. If we do nothing, we will be wiped out. I would rather gamble on humanity than accept extinction." With a deep breath, Chirin activated the emergency distress beacon. The message was simple. "This is a call for help. We are the auxiliary of Velmera. Our people face annihilation. The galaxy has turned its back on us. Will you?" With that, the message was sent, racing across the stars toward a small blue planet called Earth. Humanity's answer. Admiral Diana Voss stood on the command bridge of the UH Endeavour, one of the most powerful battleships in the human fleet. The distress call had just come in. She read the message twice, then turned to her officers. "They need help," she said simply. Her second-in-command, Captain Elias Carter, crossed his arms. "The Sci-Fi won't like it if we interfere. We could lose trade, maybe even face sanctions." Diana smirked. "The Sci-Fi never liked us anyway." Carter chuckled. "That's true." Then, more seriously, he asked, "Do you really think it's worth it? The Draken Dominion is no joke. We could be walking into a war we can't win." Diana turned to the large viewport, staring at the stars beyond. She had studied the auxiliary before, a peaceful race. No military strength, no interest in conquest, just a civilization trying to survive. And now, they were about to be wiped out, simply because they were weak. Diana's jaw tightened. "I don't care about the Sci-Fi's politics. I don't care about the Draken's threats. What I care about is this." She tapped the console, replaying the final words of the message. "The galaxy has turned its back on us. Will you?" She looked at her crew. "If we ignore this call, we're no better than the Union. If we go, we might save an entire species." A long silence followed. Then Carter grinned. Well, when you put it that way. The bridge filled with the sounds of officers rushing to stations, sending orders to the fleet. The message was relayed back to Earth's high command. But Diana already knew what the response would be. Humanity had made its choice. As the engines roared to life and the fleet prepared for warp, Diana gave the order. Set course for Velmera. Let's show them what it means to have humanity on their side. The auxiliary people gathered in silence as the storm rolled across the evening sky. Chiron Vel stood on the balcony of the High Council Tower, watching as the dark clouds twisted above Velmera's capital. The wind carried the distant voices of his people, fearful whispers, quiet prayers, and the sound of families preparing to flee underground. The Sci-Fi Union had abandoned them. The Draken invasion was coming. And now they had placed all their hope in a species most of the galaxy did not trust. Humans. Would they come? Would they fight? Or would they turn away, just as the Union had? Chiron's communicator beeped. His heart pounded as he accepted the transmission. A human face appeared on the holographic screen. Admiral Diana Voss. Her dark eyes were sharp, her expression firm. "This is Admiral Voss of the United Human Fleet," she said. "We received your distress call. We are en route to Velmera." Chiron's breath caught. "You mean you will help us?" Voss gave a small, confident smile. "We don't abandon those in need." The relief that flooded through Chiron nearly brought him to his knees. "Admiral, the Draken will be here soon. Their fleet is strong. If you stand with us, you may." Voss cut him off. "We know the risks. We don't care." Chiron blinked. "But why? The Union has warned you. Helping us will make you their enemy." Voss leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you something about humanity, Chiron. We don't take orders from the Union, and we don't let bullies decide who lives and who dies." Chiron nodded, feeling hope for the first time in days. "Then, we will fight together." Voss's voice was steady. "Yes, and we'll make sure the Draken regret ever thinking they could take Velmera." The transmission ended. Chiron turned to the council members gathered behind him. "The humans are coming." A murmur spread through the room. Some still uncertain, others stunned. Rhea Sol stepped forward. "Then we must be ready. If they are willing to fight for us, we must fight alongside them." For the first time, the auxiliary prepared, not for surrender, but for war. The arrival of the fleet. Days later, the skies above Velmera burned with light, not from the invading Draken fleet, but from the arrival of humanity. Hundreds of sleek, steel-gray warships emerged from warp, forming a defensive perimeter around the planet. At the center of the formation was the UHS Endeavor, the flagship of Admiral Voss. The people of Velmera watched in awe as the human fleet moved into position. They had come. Inside the Endeavor, Admiral Voss stood at the command bridge, watching her fleet settle into orbit. Status report. Captain Elias Carter studied the readings. Fleet is holding steady. Planetary defenses are being reinforced. Ground teams are coordinating with the auxiliary. He glanced at her. "They're still in shock that we actually showed up." Voss smirked. "Good. Let's give them a reason to believe in us." Just then, a new signal came in, one that made the entire bridge go silent. "Admiral," an officer said grimly. "The Draken fleet just entered the system." Voss exhaled slowly. "Show me." On the main screen, a massive fleet of Draken warships emerged from hyperspace. Their dark, spiked hulls glowed with crimson energy. The lead battleship, the Bloodfang, sent out a transmission. The image of a Draken warlord appeared, a towering figure with reptilian features and burning red eyes. His voice was deep, filled with arrogance. "I am Lord Kravis of the Draken Dominion. This world now belongs to us. Withdraw, humans, or be destroyed." Voss folded her arms. "Not happening." Kravis narrowed his eyes. "The Sci-Fi Union has abandoned these creatures. Why do you risk your lives for them?" Voss's response was simple. "Because we can." Kravis let out a slow, mocking laugh. You are outnumbered. You have no allies. Do you truly think you can stop us? Voss's lips curled into a smirk. Let's find out. She turned to her crew. All ships, prepare for battle. The humans had made their choice. Now they would show the galaxy why humanity never backs down. The sky above Velmera was no longer calm. It was filled with the engines of war. The Draken fleet had arrived in full force. Massive warships shaped like jagged blades, glowing red with the energy of their weapons. The lead battleship, Bloodfang, hovered at the center of the enemy formation, its cannons aimed directly at the planet. On the UH's Endeavor, Admiral Diana Voss stood at the command bridge, her sharp eyes fixed on the approaching threat. The enemy fleet was larger, but she had seen worse. They expect us to be afraid, she said calmly. Let's disappoint them. Captain Elias Carter checked the defense systems. Shields are up. All ships in formation. Ground forces report they're ready. He hesitated. Admiral, the Xilari have never fought a real war before. If the Draken break through, Voss didn't let him finish. They won't. She turned to her officers. Signal to all ships. Hold the line. No retreat. No surrender. The order was sent. Across the human fleet, soldiers and pilots braced themselves. They would not be the ones to break today. The first strike. A deep, growling voice came through the communication system. It was Lord Kravis, leader of the Draken invasion. Humans, he sneered, you stand in the way of a superior force. Your bravery is pointless. Your destruction is certain. Admiral Voss smirked. Funny. That's exactly what the last enemy said before we crushed them. Kravis's eyes flashed with anger. Then die with them. The Draken fired first. A storm of plasma blasts streaked across space, lighting up the void. The human fleet held its position, their shields absorbing the first wave of attacks. Then they fired back. Human railguns and missile batteries unleashed a counterattack, striking the Draken ships with pinpoint accuracy. Several smaller enemy vessels exploded instantly, while others spun out of control. But the Draken kept coming. The battle had begun. The fight for Velmera. On the surface, Xilari civilians huddled in underground bunkers, listening to the distant booms of the space battle above. They had never seen war like this. In the capital city, Xilari warriors, those who had chosen to fight, stood on the defensive walls, holding plasma rifles with nervous hands. Rhea Sol, now in charge of planetary defenses, looked up as the first wave of Draken dropships pierced through the clouds. They're landing, she whispered. A Xilari soldier beside her trembled. We cannot stop them. Rhea tightened her grip on her rifle. We won't be fighting alone. Just then, the human ground forces arrived. From the sky, armored dropships roared down, deploying human soldiers in exosuits and combat armor. They moved quickly, setting up turrets and energy shields. One of the human officers, Commander Jacob Hale, approached Rhea. You ready for this? He asked. Rhea took a deep breath. We have no choice. Hale smirked. Good answer. Then, the Draken attack began. The battle rages. The Draken ground forces stormed the city, their reptilian warriors charging forward with deadly energy blades and heavy weapons. They expected the Xilari to fall easily. They did not expect humanity. Human snipers took position on the rooftops, picking off enemy leaders with precise shots. Heavy gunners unleashed waves of fire, forcing the Draken into cover. And when the enemy got too close, human soldiers met them in brutal close combat. The Xilari, seeing the humans fight, found something inside themselves they never knew existed. The will to stand and fight. Rhea lifted her rifle and fired her first shot, taking down a Draken soldier. Others followed her lead. The Xilari were no longer just victims. They were warriors now. A turning point. Back in orbit, the space battle grew fiercer. The Bloodfang focused its cannons on the UH's Endeavor, unleashing a devastating barrage. The human flagship shook under the impact, alarms blaring. "Shields are down to 40%, Carter shouted. Voss gritted her teeth. She needed to end this. She turned to her weapons officer. "Target the Bloodfang's engines. Fire everything we've got." A moment later, a massive barrage of railgun rounds and missiles struck the enemy flagship. Explosions ripped through the hull. On the Bloodfang's bridge, Lord Kravis stumbled as his ship lurched violently. Smoke filled the air. "Impossible," he growled. "How can humans fight like this?" One of his officers looked at him with fear. "Sir, they are not retreating. They are fighting harder." Kravis clenched his claws. He had thought this battle would be easy. Now he realized the truth. Humanity did not break. They only fought harder when pushed. For the first time, doubt entered his mind. The unbreakable spirit. Back on the surface, Commander Hale and Rhea stood side by side, firing at the last wave of Draken troops. The enemy forces were falling back. "They're retreating," Rhea gasped. Hale grinned. "Damn right they are." Above them, the human fleet pushed forward, driving the Draken ships into a desperate retreat. The Bloodfang, heavily damaged, turned and flowed into deep space. On the Endeavor's bridge, Carter let out a breath. "They're running." Voss nodded. "Let them. They know what happens if they come back." She turned to the planet below, where the Xilari stood with their human allies. For the first time in history, they had fought back. And won. Voss sent a message to the Xilari leadership. "The first battle is over. But the war is not. We stand with you. Until the end." And across the galaxy, whispers began to spread. Humanity was not to be underestimated. And when they stood with you, they never backed down. The battlefield was quiet now. Smoke rose from the burning wreckage of Draken ships and fallen war machines. The once peaceful cities of Velmera were scared with craters, broken buildings, and shattered streets. But for the first time in history, the Xilari had not fallen. Rhea Sol stood on a ruined balcony, looking at the sunrise. They had survived. But at what cost? Behind her, human and Xilari medics worked together, treating the wounded. The cries of injured soldiers echoed in the air. Commander Jacob Hale walked up to her, his armor still stained with dust and battle scars. "You did well," he said. Rhea turned to him, her golden eyes tired. "We lost too many." Hale sighed. "That's war." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But we won, and that means something." Rhea wasn't sure. They had driven the Draken back, but she could still feel the fear in her people's hearts. They had never known war before. Could they survive another battle? She looked up at the sky, where the human fleet hovered like guardians. She had no doubt the humans would fight for them again. But how long could humanity keep fighting before they too paid the price? The aftermath. In the Xilari High Council chamber, the leaders of Velmera gathered. Chirin Vel stood at the head of the table, his face worn with exhaustion. On the holographic screen before him, Admiral Diana Voss and Captain Elias Carter of the United Human Fleet listened in. "The Draken have retreated for now," Chirin said. "But they will return." Voss nodded. "They underestimated us. Next time, they won't." One of the Xilari Council members, an elder named Varga, spoke with hesitation. "Next time, will you still be here?" Carter raised an eyebrow. "You think we just leave you now?" Varen shifted uncomfortably. "The Sci-Fi Union will not like your interference. They may take action against you." Voss smirked. "Let them." Chirin leaned forward. "You are willing to risk everything for us." Voss's expression hardened. "We made a promise. Humans don't break promises." Silence filled the room. Then, slowly, Chirin nodded. "Then we must prepare, together." For the first time, the Xilari and humanity stood as true allies. The Draken's next move. Far from Velmera, in the depths of space, Lord Kravis stood in his darkened war chamber. He watched the battle reports in silence. The Draken had never lost to a weaker species before, and yet the humans had stopped them. A Draken commander stepped forward. "My lord, the humans are stronger than we thought." Kravis growled, "I do not care how strong they are. I will not let this insult stand." He turned to his officers. "Send word to the Dominion. We will return in full force. This time, we will not just take Velmera." His claws clenched into a fist. "We will burn every world that stands with humanity." The war was not over. It had just begun. To be continued. This part shows the aftermath of the battle, the growing alliance between the Xilari and humanity, and the looming threat of the Draken's revenge. Let me know if you want any changes before I move on to Part 5. You said, Part 5 to 750 words Kaleko or interesting Huna Chaya, or third-person style Malekniha or simple basic English Ka. Don't use any violated word, so please avoid any violated content. ChatGPT said. Part 5. The War Council. The sky above Velmera had cleared, but the scars of battle remained. The streets were still covered in rubble, and the air smelled of burned metal. The Xilari had won their first battle, but the fear of what came next still lingered in their hearts. Inside the High Council chamber, the leaders of Velmera sat across from their new human allies. Admiral Diana Voss and Commander Jacob Hale stood at the center, their presence strong and unwavering. Chiron Vel, the leader of the Xilari, spoke first. "The Draken will return, and this time they will come with everything they have." His voice was filled with worry. Voss nodded. "They won't make the same mistakes twice. They know we're a threat now." Rhea Sol, the Xilari warrior who had fought alongside the humans, clenched her fists. "So what do we do? Wait for them to come back and destroy us?" Hale smirked. "No, we take the fight to them." Gasps filled the chamber. The Xilari were not warriors by nature. They had spent centuries relying on the Sci-Fi Union for protection. But now, the Union had abandoned them. Chiron hesitated. "We have never launched an attack before." Voss crossed her arms. "Then it's time to learn. If we wait, they'll bring a fleet large enough to wipe Velmera off the map. We can't give them that chance." One of the older council members, Varenka, frowned. "But how? The Draken fleet is massive. Even with humanity's help, we are outnumbered." Voss's expression was calm but determined. "Then we don't fight them head-on." She turned to Carter, who activated a holographic map of the Draken Dominion. A red-marked location appeared on the display. "This is Outpost Varga, a key Draken supply station. If we destroy it, they lose fuel, weapons, and resources. We weaken them before they can strike again." Chiron studied the map. "A precise attack instead of a full war." Hale nodded. "Hit them where it hurts." Rhea's eyes lit up with determination. "Then let's do it." For the first time in history, the Xilari would go to war, not as victims, but as fighters. Preparing for battle, the human fleet moved into action. Soldiers trained the Xilari in combat, teaching them how to use human weapons and strategy. The once peaceful species learned quickly, driven by the need to protect their home. In a hidden hangar, Rhea Sol stood in front of a squad of Xilari fighters, each holding a human-built plasma rifle. "You are afraid," she said, pacing before them. "I understand. I was afraid too." She stopped, looking each of them in the eye. "But when the humans stood with us, I learned something." She clenched her fist. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing tall despite it. And today, we stand tall." The Xilari soldiers cheered, their fear replaced with purpose. In orbit, the human fleet prepared for departure. Sleek battleships and Xilari cruisers powered up their engines, ready for war. On the UHS Endeavour, Carter turned to Voss. "Do you think they're ready?" Voss smirked. "We'll find out soon enough." She looked at the fleet outside. "All ships, prepare for warp. We bring the fight to them." The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The fleet vanished into hyperspace. The ambush at Varga. Outpost Varga floated in the darkness of space, surrounded by Draken warships. It was heavily defended, but the enemy was not expecting an attack. That was their mistake. The human auxiliary fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Within seconds, the attack began. Railguns and missiles tore through the enemy defenses. Scifi pilots, flying alongside human squadrons, weaved through enemy fire, striking targets with deadly precision. On the ground, human and Scifi soldiers stormed the outpost, blasting through Draken forces. Rhea and Hale fought side by side, moving like a single unstoppable force. Rhea took down a Draken soldier with a precise shot, while Hale covered her from behind. "You're getting good at this," Hale said with a grin. Rhea smirked. "I learned from the best." The battle raged on, but the Draken were not prepared. One by one, their defenses crumbled. Inside the control center, a Draken officer frantically sent out a distress signal. "To Lord Kravis, Velmera's forces have attacked. We need—" Before he could finish, an explosion ripped through the base. The outpost was lost. A new dawn. Back on Velmera, cheers erupted as the message arrived. The attack was a success. The Draken had lost a major supply base, and their invasion plans had been disrupted. In the Scifi High Council chamber, Chirin Vel turned to Admiral Voss. "You have changed my people," he said. "We are no longer just survivors. We are warriors." Voss smiled. "And this is just the beginning." Rhea looked up at the sky, where human and Scifi ships patrolled together. The Draken would come again. The Sci-Fi Union would not approve. But for the first time, the Scifi were not afraid. Humanity had stood by their side. And together, they would fight for their future. The attack on Outpost Varga was a success, but war was far from over. The Draken had suffered a blow, yet their forces were still powerful. On Velmera, the Scifi celebrated their first victory in history. The streets, once silent with fear, were now filled with voices of hope. Scifi warriors trained harder, and their people looked up at the sky with determination instead of dread. But in the shadows, a greater danger was growing. A warning from the Sci-Fi Union. Inside the Scifi High Council chamber, Chirin Vel and his advisors sat across from their human allies. Admiral Diana Voss and Commander Jacob Hale stood, waiting for what Chirin had to say. Chirin's face was tense. "We received a message from the Sci-Fi Union this morning." The room fell silent. The Sci-Fi Union was supposed to be the protector of weaker civilizations like the Scifi. But when the Draken attacked, they had done nothing. Voss crossed her arms. "Let me guess, they're not happy we fought back." Chirin nodded. He activated the holographic transmission, and a tall, pale-skinned alien in golden robes appeared. His sharp gaze sent a chill through the room. "Chirin Vel," the alien's voice echoed. "Your people have broken the balance of peace. You have allied with the humans, and now war spreads. This is unacceptable." Chirin's hands clenched. "The Draken would have wiped us out. The humans stood by us when you did not." The Sci-Fi leader's expression did not change. "The humans are dangerous. They fight without knowing when to stop. If you continue this path, we will not protect you from the consequences." The transmission ended. For a long moment, the room was silent. Rhea Sol, standing near the back, finally spoke. "They abandoned us, and now they blame us for surviving." Voss smirked. "Sounds familiar. We've heard those kinds of threats before. The question is, are you afraid?" Chirin took a deep breath and looked at his people. The answer was clear. "No, we stand with humanity, no matter the cost." The Draken's counterattack. While Velmera prepared for war, deep in space, Lord Kravis had gathered his most powerful warlords. The Draken's Supreme Council stood around a massive war map. The red markings showed the human and Scifi fleets. The loss of outpost Varga had slowed their invasion, but Kravis was not finished. One of his generals, a massive, scared Draken named Jorek, pointed at Velmera. "We should crush them now, before they gain more strength." Kravis shook his head. "No, the humans fight harder when cornered. We will break them another way." He turned to another Draken, a spymaster named Vekarus, whose eyes gleamed with dark intelligence. "You know what to do." Vekarus grinned. "Yes, my lord. Let's see how strong their alliance really is." Betrayal in the dark. Back on Velmara, Admiral Voss and Commander Hale walked through the human military headquarters, discussing battle plans. "We need more intelligence on the Draken fleet," Hale said. "They're planning something big. I can feel it." Before Voss could respond, an alarm blared. Security breach. Unknown intruder detected. Voss and Hale rushed toward the control room, where soldiers were already scanning for the threat. On the main screen, a ghostly transmission flickered to life. It was Vekarus, the Draken spymaster. His reptilian face twisted into a sly smile. "Humans," he hissed, "you fight well. But do you really know your allies?" The screen changed, showing secret documents, revealing classified human war strategies and communications. The words flashed in bold letters. Top secret. Human strategic control over XELARI space. Rhea Sol, standing nearby, felt her heart stop. "What is this?" Voss's eyes darkened. "This is fake." Vekarus chuckled. "Is it? Or did the humans always plan to control you, just like the Sci-Fi Union?" The transmission cut off, leaving only silence. For a moment, tension filled the room. Silari soldiers looked at the humans, doubt creeping into their eyes. Chirinvel frowned. "Admiral, is this true?" Voss's voice was firm. "No, this is exactly what the Draken want, to divide us." But the damage had been done. Some Silari whispered among themselves, unsure. Rhea clenched her fists. "The Draken are trying to break us apart. We cannot let them." Chirin took a deep breath and nodded. "The humans have fought and bled for us. I will not doubt them now." But the seed of distrust had been planted, and the Draken were waiting for it to grow. A war on two fronts. That night, the streets of Velmera were uneasy. The people had celebrated victory, but now, whispers of doubt spread through the city. In a hidden chamber, a small group of Silari leaders met in secret. One of them, a politician named Calisfor, spoke in a low voice. "Perhaps we trusted the humans too quickly," he murmured. "Perhaps the Sci-Fi Union was right." A few others nodded. "We should rethink our alliance before it's too late." They did not know that outside, Draken spies listened in the shadows, smiling. The Draken's plan was working. As the fleet prepared for the next battle, another war had already begun, one of loyalty, trust, and betrayal. And if humanity and the Exilari could not stand together, they would fall apart. The tension on Velmera was growing. The streets that had once been filled with celebration now held whispers of doubt. The Draken's deception had planted a dangerous seed, distrust between the Exilari and the humans. Commander Jacob Hale and Admiral Diana Voss knew the truth, but convincing the Exilari was another battle. "We cannot afford to be divided," Voss said in the War Council. "The Draken are coming, and this time, they won't stop until we're all gone." Chirinvel looked at his people, some of whom now hesitated. "We must fight together. We will not let fear control us." But doubt lingered in the air, and the Draken fleet was already on its way. The Draken attack. Beyond Velmera's orbit, a massive fleet emerged from hyperspace. Draken warships, twice the size of human battleships, spread across the sky like a storm. Their leader, Lord Kravis, stood aboard his flagship, watching the planet below. "This time," he growled, "there will be no escape." The attack began. Fire rained down from the sky. Enemy ships blasted through Velmera's defenses. The human auxiliary fleet scrambled to meet them, but the Draken's numbers were overwhelming. Inside the command center, alarms blared. Shields at 40%, a human officer shouted. We can't hold them forever. A auxiliary technician added. Admiral Voss clenched her fists. Then we fight until we can't. The final battle had begun. The auxiliary's choice. In the city, panic spread. Some auxiliary leaders, including Callis-4, saw the destruction and hesitated. The humans have brought this war to our world. He shouted. We should surrender before it's too late. Rhea Sol had heard enough. She stepped forward, facing him. You're wrong, she said, voice steady. The humans didn't bring this war. The Draken did. And if we surrender, they won't spare us. They never do. The council chamber fell silent. Rhea turned to the warriors behind her. We are not weak anymore. We are not helpless. We fight, or we lose everything. One by one, the auxiliary warriors stood with her. Callis-4 and his followers stepped back, realizing they had lost. Chirin-Vel stood tall. Then it is decided. We fight together. The auxiliary had made their choice. The battle turns. In space, the fight was brutal. Human and auxiliary ships weaved through enemy fire, destroying Draken warships one by one. But they were still outnumbered. On the ground, Draken troops landed in the capital. Auxiliary and human soldiers fought side by side, defending the city. Blades clashed. Plasma fire lit up the streets. Rhea Sol and Jacob Hale led a strike team toward the enemy command post. We take out their ground leader. We weaken them, Hale said. Rhea nodded. Let's end this. Through the smoke-filled battlefield, they pushed forward, cutting down Draken soldiers until they reached their target, Commander Jorek. The massive Draken warrior stood waiting, his armor glinting in the firelight. You are weak, Jorek sneered. Your kind will always be prey. Rhea raised her weapon. Not today. The battle began. The fall of Lord Kravis. High above, Admiral Voss stared at the battlefield. The human flagship was damaged. The auxiliary fleet was struggling, and victory seemed distant. Then she saw it. A weak point in the Draken flagship's defenses. All ships target their engines, she ordered. With their remaining strength, the fleet unleashed everything on the enemy's flagship. Explosions ripped through the Draken command ship. Inside, Lord Kravis roared in fury as his ship began to fall apart. This is not over, he growled. But it was. His ship exploded in a massive fireball, shaking the battlefield. The Draken fleet hesitated. Without their leader, their unity broke. And the humans and Silari pushed forward, driving them back. The Draken, once unstoppable, were defeated. A new future. As the sun rose over Velmera, the people looked at the sky, at the human and Silari ships standing together. The war was over. Chirin-Vel turned to Admiral Voss. The Sci-Fi Union will not like what we have done today. Voss smirked. Let them come. We'll be ready. Rhea Sol stood beside Jacob Hale, watching the sunrise. We did it, she said. Hale nodded. Together. For the first time, the galaxy had turned its back on them. But humanity and the Exilari had stood by each other's side. And together, they had won.